All right, so, everyone loves to talk about change in education,
Right.
but have you ever stopped to think about the speed of that change?
Yeah, that's a good point. We talk about the what and the why of change,
Right.
but the how fast or how slow often gets overlooked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And today we're going to dive into this idea of speed.
Mhm.
And to help us navigate this, we've got some great sources to work with.
Yeah.
We've got a thought-provoking blog post by Dr. Howie Knoff, who really emphasizes that speed kills in both directions, too slow and too fast.
Interesting. So, like Goldilocks, we're looking for the just right pace.
Haha, pretty much. And to contrast that, we've got this super interesting interview in K-12 Dive with Mike Miles, the superintendent of the Houston Independent School District.
Ah, Houston, a district that's been making headlines for its rapid reform efforts.
Exactly. They're definitely leaning into the go fast to go fast approach, which is kind of what makes this whole conversation so fascinating.
Yeah, it's a great example of how different contexts can call for different approaches.
Totally. So today, we're not here to tell you which speed is right or wrong.
Right.
Instead, we're going to really dissect these sources
Yeah.
to understand when going slow might be the best strategy and when a more accelerated pace might be necessary.
I like it. So, are we ready to hit the gas or pump the brakes and take a closer look?
Let's hit the gas and head straight to Houston.
Okay, buckle up.
So paint us a picture.
Uh,
What was the situation that Mike Miles walked into when he took over the district?
Imagine this: over 100 schools rated D or F, persistent teacher shortages, and this overwhelming sense of urgency to make a real difference for students.
Whoa, wait. So he's basically dealing with the district in crisis mode.
Yeah, pretty much. And that context is really important, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did he even begin to tackle a challenge of that magnitude?
Well, he came in with this idea of whole-scale systemic reform.
Full-scale systemic reform. Sounds intense.
It was. It's this idea that you don't just tinker around the edges, you go big.
So not just small tweaks here and there.
Nope. We're talking about transforming a significant chunk of the district all at once.
Wow, that's a bold move. So how did he actually implement these changes? Did he just snap his fingers and everything magically transformed?
Haha, no, not quite.
Yeah.
But they definitely moved quickly. One of the first things they did was roll out a brand new instructional model. They literally changed how teachers were delivering content in the classroom.
Wow. That must have been a huge adjustment for the teachers. Like,
Right.
how do you even begin to shift an entire district's teaching style so rapidly?
Well, a key part of their strategy was this laser focus on the quality of instruction.
Okay, so they didn't just throw a new curriculum at teachers and say, figure it out.
Exactly. It was all about providing intensive coaching, frequent observations, and immediate feedback, like constant support to help teachers master this new model.
So it's like, go fast, but don't leave anyone behind.
Yeah, you could say that. And they also developed their own curriculum.
Oh, wow. They really went all in.
They did. It was specifically designed to be tightly aligned with state standards and flexible enough to meet different students' needs.
Okay, so new instructional model, check.
Yeah.
New curriculum, check.
Check.
But what about the teachers?
Ah, yes, the human element.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Were they on board with all of this, or were there concerns about, like, burnout and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable, right? Change can be stressful,
For sure.
especially when it's happening this quickly. And there were definitely concerns about teacher burnout and retention.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did they address that?
They actually made significant investments in staffing.
Okay.
Things like creating teacher apprenticeship programs, bringing in more learning coaches, and reducing class sizes. Basically surrounding teachers with as much support as possible.
Interesting. So they acknowledged that pushing for rapid change also meant providing the resources to support that change.
Absolutely. And the results were pretty impressive.
Really? So what happened? Did this go fast approach actually work?
Well, in just 1 year, they managed to significantly decrease the number of schools with D and F ratings.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like this go fast to go fast strategy can actually be effective in certain situations.
Right. It's pretty remarkable. But it does raise the question, is this kind of rapid transformation sustainable?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And that leads us perfectly to Dr. Knopf, who, as you mentioned, has a slightly different perspective on this whole speed thing.
Yeah, he argues that speed kills in both directions, too slow and too fast.
Right. It's not just about going fast.
Right.
It's about finding that optimal pace. So when we come back, we'll dive into those 10 variables he outlines that can help determine the appropriate speed for any given situation. Sounds good. I'm ready to unpack those variables.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we've got Houston, where they really slammed on the gas pedal to turn things around.
Right.
But now let's shift gears a bit and talk about Dr. Knopf's perspective. He argues that speed kills in both directions, too slow and too fast.
Yeah, and his approach is all about understanding that there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to the pace of change.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So how does he propose we figure out the right speed then?
Well, he lays out these 10 variables that we need to consider.
10 variables? That sounds kind of complicated.
It's not as daunting as it sounds. Trust me, it all comes together really beautifully.
Okay, I'm trusting you. So give us a sneak peek. What are a couple of these variables that you find particularly interesting or important?
Well, leadership history is a big one. It's basically looking at the track record of past leaders and how that influences people's perceptions of change.
Oh, so like if there's been a lot of turnover or failed initiatives in the past?
Exactly. That can create a lot of skepticism and resistance to anything new.
Makes sense? People are going to be hesitant to jump on board if they've been burned before.
Right. It's like, why bother? It's just going to be another flavor of the month initiative that fizzles out in a year.
Oof. I can see how that would create a tough environment for any kind of change, fast or slow.
Totally. And then there's initial pitch, which is all about how the need for change is communicated.
Okay, so it's not just what you're changing.
Right.
It's how you're presenting it to people.
Exactly. It's about crafting a compelling narrative, addressing people's concerns, and getting them excited about the vision for the future.
So like good marketing, basically.
Kind of. But it's more than just hype. It's about transparency, authenticity, and genuine engagement.
That makes sense. So those are just 2 of the 10, but I can already see how they play a huge role in setting the stage for successful change.
And those are particularly relevant when you consider that case study he talks about.
Oh yeah, the one with the disgruntled discipline diva?
Yeah, that one. This case study really brings these variables to life.
So set the scene for us.
Yeah.
What was going on in this district?
So unlike Houston, this district wasn't in crisis mode. They were actually doing pretty well academically.
Okay, so not a sinking ship that needed rescuing.
No, but they had recognized the need to revamp their approach to discipline, classroom management, that whole social emotional learning piece.
Got it. So it was more about continuous improvement than a complete overhaul.
Yeah, exactly. And they were committed to doing it right.
Which
means taking a more deliberate, collaborative approach.
Okay, so go slow to go fast.
Yep. They wanted to make sure everyone was on board and felt heard throughout the process.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that's where our disgruntled discipline diva comes in.
Yep. She was super passionate about her work, particularly when it came to student discipline.
Okay.
But she felt like she and others who had been leading the existing discipline program were kind of left out of the loop.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would sting, especially if you've poured your heart and soul into something.
Exactly. And her concerns really highlight the importance of those 2 variables we just talked about.
Leadership history and initial pitch.
Bingo. It seems like there may have been some, let's say, opportunities for improvement in how the need for change was communicated and how stakeholders like her were engaged in the process.
So even when you're intentionally trying to go slow, you can still trip up if you don't pay attention to those crucial elements.
Absolutely. And this is where I think Dr. Knopf's expertise really shines through.
How so?
Well, he didn't just dismiss her concerns. He took the time to respond to her email thoughtfully.
Okay, good. He didn't just brush her off.
Nope. He acknowledged that change can be anxiety-provoking.
Yeah, no kidding.
And that sometimes our attachment to the status quo can prevent us from embracing new possibilities, even when they're better for everyone involved.
That's deep. I mean, it's true. We all get comfortable with what we know.
Yeah, it's human nature. And sometimes we need a little nudge.
Or compassionate email from Dr. Knopf.
Exactly.
So how did this whole situation with the disgruntled discipline diva play out in the end?
Well, he shared some data with her, showing that a lot of staff members actually felt like the current discipline system wasn't very effective.
So he kind of backed up the need for change with some evidence.
Exactly. And he clarified that her school's discipline leader had actually been invited to an initial meeting.
Oh, so it wasn't a deliberate exclusion.
No, it seemed more like a miscommunication or scheduling conflict.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
But I can still see how, from her perspective, it felt like she was being left out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why that clear, consistent communication is so crucial.
Right. It's not just about sending out an email or 2. It's about making sure that people feel heard, understood, and involved.
Yeah, it's about building relationships and trust. which takes time and effort.
Which kind of circles back to that whole go slow to go fast idea.
Right. It's not about rushing the process. It's about creating a foundation of trust and shared understanding that allows for sustainable change.
I like that. So even though this district was taking a more deliberate approach, they still needed to maintain a healthy pace to avoid getting bogged down.
Exactly. And Dr. Knopf emphasizes that even in a go slow scenario, you got to keep moving forward.
Right. Inaction can be just as dangerous as recklessness.
He puts it really well. Glaciers that move too slow melt.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we can't just sit back and wait for things to happen.
Yeah.
We got to keep pushing forward, even if it's in small, incremental steps.
Yeah, and sometimes those small steps can actually lead to bigger, more sustainable leaps in the long run.
All right, so we talked about leadership history, initial pitch, and how those played out in this case study.
Right.
What are some of the other variables that Dr. Knopf says we need to consider?
Well, resource availability is a big one. You can't implement any change, fast or slow, without the right resources, whether it's funding, staffing, materials, you name it.
Right, it's like trying to build a house without any tools or lumber.
Exactly. And it's not just about having those resources up front, but also making sure they're available throughout the entire process.
So sustainability is key. You got to be able to keep the momentum going.
Absolutely. And then there's professional development, which goes hand in hand with resources. You can have the best curriculum in the world, but if teachers aren't equipped to use it effectively, it's not going to make much of a difference.
So true. It's about investing in people, giving them the tools and training they need to succeed.
Exactly. And that includes ongoing coaching and support.
Right. It's not just a one-and-done workshop. It's about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement.
Absolutely. And then to track the progress of that learning and the impact of the changes, we need data and evaluation.
Right. You got to be able to measure what's working and what's not. Otherwise, you're just guessing.
Exactly. It's about collecting data,
Mhm.
analyzing it, and
Uh-huh.
using it to inform your decisions and make adjustments along the way.
So it's about being data-informed, not just data-driven.
Exactly. It's not about letting the numbers dictate everything, but rather using them as a tool to guide your decision-making.
Okay. Resource availability, professional development, and data and evaluation. What else?
Policy coherence is another important one. It's about making sure that the changes you're implementing are aligned with existing policies and procedures.
So you're not creating a bunch of contradictions or unnecessary bureaucracy.
Exactly. It's about making sure everything's working together smoothly.
Okay, makes sense. But what about the people involved? How do you account for the fact that everyone reacts differently to change?
That's where capacity for change comes in. It's all about a district or school's ability to manage and sustain change effectively.
And I'm guessing that has a lot to do with leadership, culture, and the overall support system in place.
You got it. It's about having strong leaders who can inspire and motivate people, a culture that embraces innovation, and a system that provides both emotional and logistical support to staff throughout the process.
Sounds like it takes a village.
It does. And to keep that village moving in the right direction, you need a realistic timeline, which is where timeline and phasing comes in.
Right, you can't expect people to make massive changes overnight. You got to give them time to adjust and learn.
Exactly. It's about breaking down the process into manageable steps, setting clear milestones, and creating a pace that's both challenging and achievable.
So it's about finding that rhythm, that sweet spot where people are being pushed but not overwhelmed.
Exactly. And it all comes back to communication.
Ah, our old friend communication.
It's the thread that ties everything together. It's about being open, honest, and transparent throughout the entire change process.
I love how this all connects back to the disgruntled, disciplined diva. It really highlights how communication is key, no matter what pace you're going at.
Absolutely. It's the foundation for everything.
Okay, so we've covered all 10 variables.
Yeah,
That was a lot, but I think I'm starting to get it.
good. It's not about memorizing a list.
Right.
It's about understanding the interconnectedness of these factors and using them as a guide to make thoughtful decisions about the speed of change.
So it's not just go slow or go fast. It's about understanding the context, the complexity of the change, and all these variables that can influence the pace and process.
You nailed it. There's no magic formula.
Right.
It's about finding the right approach for your unique situation.
And how do we actually do that? How do we find that healthy pace that Dr. Knopf talks about?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's something we're going to explore in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, I am ready for more. Bring on the healthy pace. All right, so we've talked about Houston's need for speed and Dr. Knopf's more measured approach. But how do we actually find that healthy pace he keeps mentioning?
It's less about setting a specific speed and more about being adaptable, you know? Like,
Yeah.
think of it as driving on a winding road.
Okay, I can see that. You got to adjust your speed based on the curves and conditions.
Exactly. And those 10 variables we discussed, those are like your GPS helping you decide when to speed up, slow down, or even take a detour.
So it's all about being strategic and flexible, not just blindly following a set speed limit.
Right. And recognizing that the right pace will always depend on the situation, the people involved, the complexity of the change, all of that.
Got it. So how do we know if we're going too fast? What are some red flags?
Well, if you're seeing a ton of resistance or confusion or people just aren't buying in,
Yeah,
that's a good sign to maybe ease off the gas a little.
makes sense. People need time to process change and get on board. You can't just expect them to instantly shift gears.
Totally. If you push too hard too fast, you risk overwhelming people and actually making things worse.
Okay, so too fast is bad. But what about too slow? How do we know if we're dragging our feet?
Remember that glacier analogy? If you're not moving at all, you're basically melting away.
Right. Stagnation can be just as deadly as recklessness. You lose momentum, enthusiasm fades, and the whole thing can just fizzle out.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot, that balance between pushing forward and making sure everyone can keep up.
So it's not about finding the right speed, but the right speed at the right
You
time.
got it. It's dynamic, not static.
This has been a super insightful deep dive. I feel like I have a much better grasp on this whole speed of change thing.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this isn't just about education. These principles apply to any kind of change, whether it's in your personal life, at work, wherever.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
Change is a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps in the road, detours, unexpected obstacles. But by being mindful of those 10 variables, communicating openly, and being willing to adapt, you can navigate those twists and turns and reach your goals.
Well said. And don't forget about patience. Be patient with yourself, with the process. Change takes time and effort.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, we want to hear from you. Think about a time when you had to adapt to a major change. Did it happen too quickly, too slowly, or just right? What factors played a role in your experience? Share your stories in the comments below. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep embracing change.